Hi friends, this is Jana from English Buff, and today we are talking with you about English punctuation. The main emphasis we're going to make on commas. Let me guess, while preparing for an English exam, you finally recognize that you know nothing about commas and you really hesitate where to put it. No wonder. English punctuation is a whole new world for English learners. But no worries, I will help you to crack it. Before we start, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and switch on notifications so as to know when the new video appears. No more leading, let's get started. Rule number 1. Use commas to separate independent clauses when they are joined by any of these 7 coordinating conjunctions. They are and, for, but, nor, or, so, yet. I'll try to make it clear. We have a sentence. A sentence consists of 2 parts. So we call them independent if when we separate them from each other, they remain the same and they have completely the same meaning as before the separation. Let's take a look at the example. The game was over, but the crowd refused to leave. We put a comma before but here because when we separate these 2 parts of the sentence, the meaning remains the same. The game was over, the crowd refused to leave. The same. Therefore, when these parts are independent, we put a comma before a coordinating conjunction. 7 of the ones I told you previously about. Let's take 2 more examples. Yesterday was her brother's birthday, so she took him out to dinner. She took her brother out to dinner so they could celebrate his birthday. In this situation, we put a comma. In this situation, we don't put a comma. Why? Because here, when we separate the sentences, the meaning will remain the same. Yesterday was her brother's birthday. Clear. She took him out to dinner. Clear. But here, if we separate these 2 sentences, the second part will be quite unclear for us without the first part. Therefore, the second part of the sentence is not independent, which means that there should be no comma before so in this situation. One more interesting thing that I need to tell you. When we have independent clauses, but they are not joined by any of the 7 coordinating conjunctions, we put a semicolon instead of a comma. Okay, let's try to spot the difference. He promised to call me and he did call me the following night. He promised to call me, he did call me the following night. We put a comma here because there is and is one of the 7 coordinate conjunctions that I told you about at the beginning of my speech. Here we put a semicolon because yes, the parts of the sentence are independent, but there is no coordinated conjunction in between. In this case, we put a semicolon instead. Rule number 2. Use commas after introductory clauses. Okay, what are introductory clauses? These are the dependent parts of the sentence that are some kind of a background information for the main part of the sentence, and you can see them right here. Of course, this is not the whole list, but just to make you familiar with some of the possible options. Okay, the example is while I was eating, the cat scratched at the door. So we put a comma after the first part, and first part is called an introductory clause, to separate the second part, which is the main clause. Introductory clause is dependent and main clause is actually independent. But When we change the parts and put an introductory phrase in the middle, there is no comma. Let's take a look. The cat scratched at the door while I was eating. No comma here because while is no longer an introductory clause. Let's take one more. Because her alarm clock was broken, she was late for work. So, because her alarm clock was broken, this is a dependent clause, which is introductory one. Again, when we change the word order and put because in the middle, there will be no comma there. She was late for work because her alarm clock was broken. No comma here. We put a comma after introductory phrases. So introductory phrases are also used in order to provide some background information, but they are not complete clauses. For example, having finished the test, he left the room. Having finished the test is an introductory phrase, but it's not complete. Therefore, we put a comma after that. To get a seat, you'd better come early. To get a seat is an introductory phrase, which is not complete actually, so we put comma after it. We also put a comma after introductory words. What is their goal? What is their purpose? They create continuity from one part or from one sentence to another one, to the next sentence. Let's take a look at the example. You have a clear understanding of the fact that these sentences are written separately, and the second sentence starts with an introductory word. In this case, this is still. Why we put comma after still? In order to emphasize that this is an introductory word, and the purpose of this introductory word is to continue the general line of the sentences. So in order to combine the first sentence with the next sentence, we use an introductory word to make them work together. However, if we decide to write these two sentences together in one sentence, the introductory word will be separated from the first part by a semicolon, and before the second part there will be a comma. And one more thing, we put a comma after time phrases. You can see all of them here. For example, by 2006, the evidence was overwhelming. By 2006 is a time phrase, therefore after it we put a comma to separate it from the main clause. Rule number 3. We put a comma in the middle of the sentence to set off unessential information for us. Okay, that's actually great, but here is a question. How to understand that the information which is written in the sentence is unessential for us? Here is a tip for you. If you can extract this part out of the sentence and the meaning remains the same, this is definitely unessential information. Let's take a look at the example. That Tuesday, which happens to be my birthday, is the only available day to meet. Can we say that Tuesday is the only available day to meet? Yes, we can. So the part which happens to be my birthday is unessential, which means it should be separated by commas from both sides. And let's take one more example. This restaurant has a lovely atmosphere. The food, on the other hand, is rather bland. Can we say the food is rather bland? Sure, we can. So, on the other hand, is unessential information, which means we should separate it by commas from both sides. And we can put it at the beginning of the sentence as well, without any difference in meaning. However, don't use commas to separate some essential parts of the information, especially if they contain that clauses. For example, the book that I borrowed from you is excellent. Firstly, let's check whether we can understand the meaning without this clause. The book is excellent. Does it make sense? Actually not, because I don't really understand which book you're talking about. And moreover, it has that clause, which means that you are not allowed to put comma anywhere in the sentence before that. So here are two tips for you how not to make a mistake with the punctuation in such kind of situations. And one more example. The girl wearing a yellow scarf is my niece. There is no that clause here, but. The girl is my niece. Does it make sense? Do I know what girl you are talking about? Definitely not. But when I add wearing a yellow scarf, it makes sense. It gives me some orientation and I get to know what girl you are talking about. Rule number 5. Use commas in a list. Let's take a look at the example. I have some fruit, vegetables, and furniture. Yeah, I know that's strange, but still, for example, that's okay. So here I separate all of these things with commas because I want you to see my list of possession. Even comma before and is present here. Comma before and is known as an Oxford comma. It's widely used in American option and it's avoided in British option. But I would rather use it just to avoid some kind of confusion in the information that I present. However, it's up to you. If you prefer British option, you don't put a comma before and. If you prefer American option, this is must have. But be careful, because if in the list there are only 2 items and they are separated by and, there should be no comma in between. I have some apples and oranges. No comma here. Rule number 6. Use a comma to separate 2 or more coordinate adjectives that describe the same noun. Okay, one more question. What is a coordinate adjective? I will help you with that. So there are 2 ways to understand whether the adjective is coordinate or not. The first thing, if you change the position of the adjective and put them in a reverse situation, in a reverse position, and the meaning remains the same, they are coordinate. And one more, if you put and in between and the meaning remains the same, they are coordinate. Let's take a look at the example. He was a difficult, stubborn child. If we say he was a stubborn, difficult child, does it make sense? Definitely it does. And if we say he was a difficult and stubborn child, does it make sense? Definitely. And one more example. I shared some ice cream with my cute baby sister. If I say, I shared some ice cream with my baby cute sister, does it work? I don't think so. And if I say, I shared some ice cream with my baby and cute sister, or with my cute and baby sister, it's a bit strange. So this is non-coordinate adjective, and therefore there should be no comma between them. We put a comma to separate a final phrase, which is an afterthought. Few people enjoy taking exams, especially on Saturdays. So this especially on Saturdays is an afterthought, which means that there should be comma before that. A pair of commas is used to offset an interrupter. Interrupter, this is like some kind of additional information which is not closely related to the general topic. Here is an example. My grandfather, a pilot in the Second World War, will be visiting me for my birthday. So the information that he is a pilot in the Second World War is actually an interrupter and doesn't have any influence on the information that I present. However, this is some kind of information that I want to share with you, therefore I put it inside. And if I put it inside, I should separate it by commas from both sides. And the last rule, use a comma to prevent any possible confusion and misreading. Let's take a look at the sentence, which changes dramatically depending on the punctuation that we use with it. The criminal, said the judge, was an idiot. The criminal said the judge was an idiot. Does it change? Definitely, it changes drastically. So be careful with placing commas in order to give a reader or a listener some clear information what you wanted to say by this sentence. And that's it. I know that's a lot, and I know that the information which I presented may seem a bit confusing for you, but this is just at first glance. When you try to get a closer look at it, when you try to use it in your own sentences and see the general strategy of how to use or avoid using some commas in their context, it will become much easier for you, I promise. That's it for now. Thank you so much for watching. I hope it was useful. Write me in comments if it really was. And I shall see you soon in the next video. Bye bye.